listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast with Johnny Slopes
top 3 to 5 pick next year.
and Amy Lott.
For the value you could have gotten at Ryan at.
I almost had 5,000 yards, but no, you don't want me. What you're saying is Wayne Gallman is the Dustin Funches of running backs?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I guess you can put me down as a book saying that.
We now bring you to the Fifth Down.
What is up, Fifth Downers? I am your host, Johnny Slopes. You are listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast. Today, unfortunately, K-Mill is in Arizona on vacation. So with me today is a special guest. Casey, introduce yourself.
Hey, my name's Casey Lucas. I just started the Fantasy Sports Central Twitter page and website. Just a little about me. I'm just a big sports fan, a really big Packers fan. So my sports page is really just a fantasy sports page for the three main sports, which is baseball, football, and basketball. So I enjoy doing that, and I'm glad to be on with you today.
Yeah. So what is your Twitter handle so people can follow you?
Okay, it's at Fantasy S Central.
And you said that you're going to be covering all sports. I think that's pretty interesting. Have you guys starting to get off the ground a little bit?
Yeah. And it's going to be a lot. And I was trying to decide whether I wanted to do just football or do all sports, because I really do love all sports, but football is really what I'm passionate about. But yeah, literally just started, so trying to get off the ground, but hopefully this will help, and I'm going to try to do more stuff along the road.
All right. It sounds great. If you were with us last week, we did part 1 to our NFL draft aftermath. We covered the NFC. We wanted to cover it all into one show, but it was just taking too long, so we split it up into 2. This is the second part of that show. We'll be covering the AFC today. But before we get into all that, I'm going to do a little bit of station identification. We are part of the BS Podcast Network. You can find them at www.bspodcastnetwork.com. We are part of the gold tier, and, we've been doing pretty well with them, so we're going to keep that going. You can also find us on iTunes, and for you non-iPhone users, we can also be found on Spreaker and Stitcher. Now, Casey, I know that you are a Packers fan. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have somebody else on that was a Lions fan. That would have been so great.
Yeah, I know. I was looking forward to this.
I really wanted to let you hammer him, but I think he got scared. He's like, "Oh no, I got to take my daughter to the mall." I was like, "That's not important." All right, but let's jump into some news and notes and get the show on the road here, yeah?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, so Keenan, I heard some news. Keenan Allen has been running at full speed. As we know, he suffered an ACL injury early last year, so this is fully expected that he should be close to fully ready. So it's nice to see that he's running at full speed. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the last 3 seasons he's had a season-ending injury. Good news for him at least is they have been 3 different injuries. I can't remember what they were. I think one was a collarbone, and then he had something, like a ruptured kidney last season. That was something weird. It was 2
years ago with the kidney.
Yeah, and then the ACL last year. So, I mean, he's had his fair share of injuries, but you saw it when he was on the field. I mean, just a dynamic player and someone who I think has a real rapport with Phillip Rivers, and I think they work really well together. And so I think if he comes back and is healthy, then I think he's going to be a huge part of their offense, and he's going to do a lot for them.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk a lot more about Keenan Allen later on in the show when we cover the Chargers. I just really like to see he's full speed. But his counterpart, Dontrelle Inman, he had some surgery for a core muscle. He'll be out for 6 weeks. I've heard some people say that he could be like that number 3 on that team, like maybe even jump Tyrell.
Yeah, Tyrell Williams had a really good season last year, but, Inman had, I think it was 2 seasons ago when he kind of broke out. So it will be interesting to see how he does. But I like Mike Williams a lot and that receiving core, so it'll be fun to see how that depth chart works out.
I like them all, damn it. I want them all on my team.
I know.
Tom Brady, we've heard some stories about his wife saying that he suffered a concussion that he played through. How much are you buying into this?
I mean, I could see it. I mean, I feel like most football players have a version of a concussion, whether it be a serious one or not. But, I mean, you wouldn't put it past Tom Brady or the Patriots if he did have concussion-like symptoms to maybe hide that and not report that. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
it honestly wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, when I saw it, it was just surprising that she would say that. That just is a bad look for them, I feel like, and it puts him in a bad spot. So it was interesting when I saw that.
Yeah, Rodney Harrison actually came out and defended Tom Brady. He was like, no, Tom cares too much about his health to put himself into jeopardy like that. But I don't know. I could see maybe if it was like, I don't know what game she was actually talking about, but if it was like an important game, I could see him playing through something like that.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Blunt signs with the Philadelphia Eagles. What kind of role do you see Blunt playing? Since we're not really covering the NFC, this is a good time to talk about it.
Yeah. You never know with the Philadelphia backfield. I think they're going to use him instead of Ryan Matthews. That's just my first thought. They might just go ahead and let Ryan Matthews start and put Blunt in at the goal. I really don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but if I were them, just coming off the season Blunt had, I would go ahead and give him the starting job, let him and Sproles see how they do as a 1-2 punch. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out with Ryan Matthews.
Yeah, I tend to believe that there will be games where he is the lead back, but there will be some games where he's going to disappear because I don't necessarily see Philadelphia playing with the lead a ton this year, and that's going to obviously work against Blunt. It's okay to be with the Patriots and be like a little plotter that gets like 3.9 yards a carry, but when you're in Philadelphia and you're playing behind, he might get game flowed out of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not too high on Blunt this season.
Yeah, I do expect, though, Ryan Matthews to get cut.
Yeah, I do, too. I think he will because, I mean, they're not going to trade him or anything. No one's really going to want him. They know they're going to cut him eventually. So, yeah, I think probably at the end of training camp he gets cut.
Do you see Ladarius Green picking up a team anywhere anytime soon?
Oh, I think he definitely does. I mean, he's still really talented. I don't know how it works out with like what kind of salary they would have to pick up if they did sign him, or how that would work. But
was he considering like retirement?
I'm not sure. I hadn't heard that. But I mean, he has an interest so much. I was really excited from a fantasy standpoint when he went to the Steelers. I thought he was going to be a big part to their offense. I was disappointed to see that he was out most of the season.
Ladarius Green, you broke everyone's heart, and this is what you get.
I know.
Zay Jones suffers a knee injury. It looks like it's a knee sprain, nothing too serious. Are you thinking that Kaepernick can swallow his ego and sign with the Seahawks?
Yeah, I think he will. I've heard different reports, actually. I listened to a radio show, the Dan Le Batard Show, and they had somebody on the other day who was close to Kaepernick, and he was saying a lot of these reports that were coming out weren't true of the Kaepernick, like what his asking price was, and that he was asking for a starting job. So I really think he will sign somewhere. He said that there were reports that had came out that 3 different teams had spoken with Kaepernick, and the guy that was on that show was actually saying that that wasn't true, and I can't remember his name right now. But he was one of the reporters that was that's been following Kaepernick. But I do think he will end up signing with the Seahawks. That just seems – I had actually told someone that a few weeks ago. That just seemed like a good spot for him, someone who could – a team that had the reputation and the respect that could take on someone like that has so much baggage.
I mean, doesn't he like money? Just sign somewhere and make some money. Be a backup.
Yeah.
All right. Sit-downers, our drink that we are drinking today, I can't believe I found this. I did not know this existed. Jack Daniels in a can.
I didn't know that existed either.
Yeah, I found it at this like little corner store. I was like, no way. I bought a 6-pack.
I'm actually I'm drinking a Corona Extra right now.
You better have like a lemon in it, right?
A lime, but I don't have.
Okay.
I don't have any limes right now. I normally do, but this is actually my last one. After this, I'm gonna have to be drinking Busch Light. That's all I've got.
I can dig it. All right. We're gonna start out here with the AFC North. Obviously, the Steelers were the division champions, so we'll start off with them first. Obviously, you know, they got the triple B, Big Ben, Bell, and Brown, but they were missing a piece of that equation last year with Martavis Bryant. And I think it kind of showed a little bit in their offense. They never really had that deep threat ability. I mean, they had Sammy Coates, who has like stone hands. They tried Eli Rogers in the slot, but they really needed another piece to that puzzle. And he's always suspended because he smokes the pot. So they went out and got Juju Smith-Schuster. Do you think that this is going to eventually add up to better numbers for a guy like Big Ben if he can stay healthy?
Yeah, I think Martavis Bryant coming back to the offense is really going to help them. Obviously, like you said, Ben staying healthy is first and foremost for that team's success. But Martavis Bryant, people forget how good that offense was with him. And it was pretty damn good last year with Eli Rogers and Sammy Coates being two of the main weapons. So switching, given Eli Rogers, he had 48 receptions last season, and I think Martavis Bryant's going to take on all those and more. And then Juju Smith should take over for Sammy Coates. He had 21 passes, and he averaged 20 yards per attempt. And so
it seemed like he caught maybe 2 passes after he broke his fingers.
Yeah. So I think Juju Smith takes over for that role, but I think Martavis Bryant comes right back and is a key part to that offense and comes back to his form he was in 2015.
Big Ben, he's going right around the middle of the 7th round, which I kind of like that spot for him. That's not bad. But, one thing that does concern me is last year, from week 10 on, Big Ben only averaged 32 attempts a game, and that's because they were feeding this monster called Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
But before that, though, Big Ben had 7 games with 3 or more touchdown passes, 9 multi-touchdown games. He's a little bit streaky, but like I said, I feel like that had a lot to do with, a missing receiver in this offense. Do you like that middle of the 7th for Big Ben?
Yeah, that he went earlier than that last year, and obviously he's fallen off. But anytime you can get a quality quarterback like that in the 7th round, I mean, I'd say go for it. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good spot for him, especially if he stays healthy, because I mean, he could easily wind up being a top 5 fantasy quarterback if he stays healthy all season.
Yeah, without a doubt. Antonio Brown, depending on what league you played in, he was either the number 1 or number 2 receiver. If you're playing PPR, he is probably number 1. And he had his lowest total in catches in 4 years, his lowest amount of yards in 4 years, and his lowest amount of targets in 4 years. But yet, his number is still stellar.
Yeah.
If you taking Big Ben, are you taking Antonio Brown over any of the big 3 running backs?
If you're in a PPR league, I think Le'Veon is going first, and then I'd probably take David Johnson, and then I'd probably take Bell. So I'd take him over Zeke, but not over David Johnson or Le'Veon in a PPR.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of people have him going like as a fourth pick because his average ADP right now is fourth overall. I think I would take him over Zeke.
Yeah, I would take him over Zeke just because of the lack of catches that Zeke's going to have, and he's just set up to have a little bit of a down year.
Who do you have the Steelers winning this division?
Yeah, I have them winning it pretty easily if Ben stays healthy. Yeah, I've got them winning it, and then I've actually got the Bengals coming in second.
You know, I have the Steelers winning it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati makes a push at it and then kind of tails off towards the end.
Yeah, it's a lot. It might be like it's been in years past where it's real tight through like week 10, and then you kind of start to tell who the best is.
Yeah. Some more on Antonio Brown. The last 2 years, this is his average receptions a game and yards a game without Big Ben. He's averaging 4.8 yards receptions a game and 68.2 yards a game without Big Ben, and he has yet to score a touchdown without him as a quarterback. So, I mean, you kind of tie a little bit of his value to Big Ben's health.
Yeah, and that's what I worry about. And I was doing a piece for a website the other day on dynasty leagues, and that's what you worry about with a player like Antonio Brown because he's just been so dependent on Ben. And I don't see Antonio Brown falling off a ton when Ben retires because I think the Steelers are going to do a lot to get a better quarterback than Landry Jones.
He's a great receiver.
But yeah, and he's just too good to pass on. But I think he's a good, like, if you're in a dynasty league, he's a good sell high candidate, definitely.
You know what's funny about this offense is this is going to sound a little bit like Dragon Ball Z, but we haven't even seen their final form yet. Like, we haven't seen really a whole lot of this whole offense playing together. So I'm really excited about this offense this year.
Yeah, they could be great.
Let's go over to Le'Veon Bell. He's obviously the second pick overall right now. He averaged 28 touches a game, which led the league. Also had 157 yards a game from scrimmage, which also led the league. But better, they were winning because of that, though. They're 7-1 when Bell had 20 or more carries, and 9-1 if you want to include the playoffs. Yeah, and he's just such a big weapon for them, and you really tell, like, when he gets hurt, you just see it in their offense. You can tell that they lose so much, and as good as Denzel Williams has done in the past filling in, he's nothing compared to Le'Veon Bell. So just his pass catching ability and his vision within the tackle is just amazing. It's fun to watch. From actually, if you thought that workload was crazy, from week 11 on, he averaged 33.6 touches a game, which is really nice, if you have him on your team, which I did. But, the more touches you get, the more chances you have for injury. Are you buying James Conner as his cuff? He's a 14th round pick right now. I mean, you always need a good handcuff with someone like Le'Veon, who has such a long history of injuries. But I think Conner will be a pretty good backup to him. He probably won't see, if Le'Veon stays healthy, he's not going to see much time at all, I don't think. But if Le'Veon gets hurt, he's going to become really valuable really fast. I know we touched on Bryant a little bit already. His average ADP right now is about middle of the 5th round. Is that a little bit too rich for you, or are you buying it there, or do you think maybe Juju Smith-Schuster could steal his spot? No, I think Martavis Bryant's definitely going to be the number 2. But yeah, I don't know. 5th round would probably be a little early for me. I'd be a little worried just because
of his history with drugs and stuff like that. So you never know. Like you see with Josh Gordon, every time he gets on the field, he gets suspended again. So I mean,
we see it time and time again.
Spending a fifth round pick is still pretty high. So I'd be cautious of that. I would maybe look for another guy at that spot, but if he's the best guy available, I'd go for it.
All right. The last person I want to mention on this team before we move on is Jesse James. He's basically free right now. There's no Ladarius Green. Any interest in him, or do you think that there's just too many mouths in this offense?
I do like him. He played a good bit last season when Green was hurt, and he seemed to be a decent part of their offense. Ben likes throwing to the tight end. So, I think he'd be a solid tight end because, tight ends are so scarce. So when you get one in an offense that likes to utilize the tight end, even though they have so many weapons, I think he'd definitely be worth a look late in the draft, and he could end up having a pretty good year if Ben uses him like I think he will. You never know with the new weapons they've got, but I think Jesse James has a pretty good season this year.
I was trying to find his ADP on Fantasy Football Calculator. I scrolled all the way down. It was not there. He's basically free.
Yeah.
I'm sure that will go up a little bit now that, Green is gone, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. Let's go over to the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team that, it seems like they suffered a little bit towards the end without A.J. Green, so they went out and got John Ross, who could take the top off the offense. I'm really liking Andy Dalton this year. I think he's going to have a bounce-back season. He was quarterback 14 last year. He's going at the back of the 11th round. The only problem, though, is he had 0 3-touchdown games last year, and from week 7 on, he only had 1 300-yard game. But he had a career low in passing touchdowns. I think that he's going to bounce back. There's no way he's not going to there's no way he's going to repeat what he did last year.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Andy Dalton fan when it comes to, real life football. I just don't think he's that good of a quarterback. But when it comes to fantasy, he's got the weapons around him to be a good fantasy quarterback. So, I think he does have a bounce-back season. The addition of Ross, like you said, I think that's going to be big for them. If he can stay healthy, that's another person that I'm pretty worried about when it comes to injuries. But, I think he's going to have a good season. A.J. Green staying healthy is literally what it all comes down to for me when it comes to the Bengals and Andy Dalton, just because you saw last season what Andy Dalton looks like without A.J. Green, and it's not very pretty.
A.J. Green only played 10 games last year, but his numbers are what an average to good receiver would put up. He had almost 1,000 yards. He had 66 catches and only in 10 games. He was probably on pace for a 1,500-yard season. Actually, I have it right here. He was on pace for 96 catches and 1,400 yards last year before getting hurt. He has a lot of big explosive games, and he's a guy that gets a lot of targets. He only had 3 healthy games where he got targeted less than 10 times.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now at his draft position. They've got him at 10 here, and that's not, if I remember correctly, that's about where he was last season.
Right around the back of the first, yeah.
So he hasn't really lost much draft stock in most people's eyes. I would have thought he would have been a little down just coming off the injury, but yeah, he's a great receiver, and I might stay away from him at 10 and go with a player like Devontae Freeman or DeMarcus.
If you don't want him, I'll take him.
Like that. But I like Devontae Freeman in a PPR league just because I'm someone who likes getting my running backs out of the way and then worrying about my receivers later. unless
I'm a wide receiver dealer.
Really But
John Ross, though, how do you see him mixing in with this offense?
Well, Ross, like I said earlier, I'm really worried about his injuries, but if he can stay healthy, I think he fits in well with the offense. He gives them a much-needed deep threat, and he's obviously very fast, breaking the combine record. But, I think it's going to be interesting to see just what he does for A.J. Green, because if he really does turn into someone who you could just send on a fly and they're going to have to, the DBs, like a safety, is going to have to account for him, that's really going to be interesting because you can't double cover both of them. So it's going to be interesting to see if one of them really has really benefits from the other. And I think A.J. Green will probably benefit more from having a guy like that can stretch the field.
Yeah, I've never really been a big fan of John Ross. I do love his speed, but if I'm taking a late round flyer on him, absolutely. Like a 13th round or 14th round, like, hell, why not?
Yeah.
Let's move over to the running backs position. Now, this is are you concerned about any of these running backs because the line is going to suck, or like who are you going to plant your flag into this backfield?
Well, I mean, Jeremy Hill, I think, is going to be the starter, and I think he's going to get the bulk of the carries this season. But I really don't want any of them. I'm not too high on any of them. I think Gio probably keeps his spot right now, and but I think Jeremy Hill, I think he is the starter. I think he gets the bulk of the carries, but I also think if he, like you've seen in the past, the Bengals don't mind switching up who their starting running back is if one of them's slumping and the other one's playing good. So you never know. But as of right now, I'd go with Jeremy Hill.
Seems like this team is a team that starts players based off of being familiar with them in the offense. That's the only thing. That's really the only reason why Jeremy Hill gets the ball still. I don't like him as a talent. He's a goal line back. He's good at getting in the end zone. That's about it. I think Joe Mixon is a better in between the tackle runner than Jeremy Hill, and he's a better pass catcher than Giovanni Bernard. He should be the starter. He should be their three down back. That's not going to happen, but he should be.
I think
kind of going right around the same area.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I think he'll be the starter next year for sure. And you never know, like if he has a breakout game, they might just go ahead and hand the reins to him.
Jeremy Hill, though, his usage has been pretty consistent over the past 3 years, getting right around 222 carries every single year. But he's not really used much in the passing game. Now, according to Pro Football Reference, he had 44 carries inside the 20-yard line, which ranked 5th in the NFL. And 6 of his 9 touchdowns came inside the 5-yard line. That's out of 15 carries. He only had 1 touchdown outside the 20-yard line. So I think that's going to be Hill's role, I think, as a short yardage back. I do think they're going to try to mix Joe Mixon in some early down work, though.
Yeah, I think they'll try to work him in just to see what he's got. I read something that was saying they can't wait to get him on the field. They're excited about him. So, that'd be someone who, if you can afford a spot late in the draft, if you have a roster spot and just want to take a chance on somebody, that'd be somebody that I would look at.
What nobody is talking about is how Giovanni Bernardi tore his ACL kind of late last year, like week 11. Have you heard anything about how his recovery is going at all?
No, not really. I haven't looked, but I haven't heard. I've been watching ESPN, but
they've been keeping pretty hush-hush about it.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. But it may be something where, but I think they like Gio a lot. So if he's healthy, I think he's still going to be their third down and their pass catching back. But if he's still hurt at the beginning of the season, go ahead.
I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they give him an extension last year?
I saw something because I was looking at their contracts. I think they did, but there may be an option in it, or even if he is signed, I think Mixon next year takes over the starting role, and Gio just comes in periodically.
All right. One last guy we should cover before we move on from Cincinnati, Tyler Eifert. He was tight end 25 due to injury last year. He's going at the back of the 5th round. I have a lot of issues with Tyler Eifert. First off, he's not a target monster. He's very unlikely to repeat his 13 touchdowns from 2015. He's injury prone. I think his ADP is rich. He only averaged 3.6 targets a game last year. So I'm just not a big fan of his.
Yeah, I liked him a lot coming out of college, and I had him when he had his breakout season 2 years ago. I got him really late, so I was happy with him.
I got him off the waiver wire.
He's someone who you always have to worry about injuries, and I like him because I think Andy Dalton is one of those quarterbacks who he likes to dump it down to the tight end if the pocket's collapsing or something. So I think Eifert can get a lot of catches, but he also gets a lot of red zone targets. I watched him a lot the season before last, and he was a big red zone target for them. But the thing with tight ends for me, they're just so scarce. So going in the the back of the 5th round, I wouldn't take him there probably. I'd probably wait for a guy like he's ranked ahead of Delaney Walker, and I think that's absurd.
Yeah, he's pretty underrated. Even when Tyler Eifert had that amazing 2015 season where he scored 13 touchdowns, still only had 74 targets that year. So that's something that concerns me. Is he doesn't get the volume that you would like to see from a top 10 tight end.
Yeah, I might even wait and get a guy like Hunter Henry in the 7th round. Someone I'd probably rather have him than Eifert, honestly.
I'm the kind of person I like to play chicken with the tight end. I like to see how long can I go before I realize I need to get a tight end.
Yeah. I'm never one of those people that goes for Gronk in the 2nd round or something like that.
All right. Let's go over to Baltimore. This is a team that finished 8-8 last year. There wasn't really a whole lot to like about their offense. Joe Flacco set a career high in completion percentage and a career high in yards, only had 20 touchdowns. But I think people don't realize how much Baltimore throws the ball. They led the league in passing attempts last year and the year before. Joe Flacco had the 5th most passing attempts of all time last year, and yet he only had 20 touchdowns to show for it.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't have a big tight end, ever since Pitta kind of broke out, they've just been looking for a tight end, and so they don't have that big touchdown machine that you can go to in the red zone. They had Steve Smith last year who was good, but he's no red zone target. And but this year it'll be interesting to see with Perriman if he can stay healthy. I liked him a lot coming out of college, but I think he's a big key to their offense. If he stays healthy, that's someone who I think they could really use.
Both Mike Wallace and Rashad Perriman are going at a pretty nice value right now. Mike Wallace is the beginning of the 11th. Perriman's at the back of the 13th. I think I kind of like Mike Wallace a little bit more. He's been established. I've read this on Twitter. John Paulson tweeted this out, and I had to look this up because I did not believe it. Mike Wallace has been a top 25 receiver 6 out of the last 7 years. The only year he wasn't is when he was with Minnesota for that 1 year.
Yeah.
I was mind-boggling. I had to look that up, and it was wow.
Yeah. I was just about to say something about that. Mike Wallace is just in the 11th round. I'd be very happy to get someone like that in the 11th round.
Wide receiver 48.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm looking here. They've got John Brown ahead of him. Pierre Garçon with San Francisco. I'd much rather take Mike Wallace than some of those guys.
Yeah, the only problem with him is he only scored 4 touchdowns. He scored 3 touchdowns in the first 2 games of the season and proceeded to only score 1 touchdown for the rest of the year. But I think that he could get a slight bump in targets, and I see some positive regression for him scoring some more touchdowns this year because as I'm heard of, to only score 4 touchdowns, as many targets as he got last year.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at that 2 ways. I mean, it can be a positive that he only scored 4 touchdowns last season because he still had a pretty good season, and that's without the touchdown. So if he adds the touchdowns, then you're really getting value with him.
I mean, he was wide receiver 22. I mean, what would he be if he had just even 3 more touchdowns, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But I do like Breshad Perriman. The only thing is we really haven't seen a whole lot of him. He had 66 targets last year. I think he's a candidate for the biggest target bump on this offense because, you know, they're without Aiken, they're without Steve Smith. I think that he's going to have the biggest bump in targets.
Yeah, I think he's a player that you could really see break out this season if he stays healthy. He's someone that I think a lot of people are excited about. I might be wary of him when drafting him. I might stay away from him just because of his injury issues. But, you know, that's someone who has a really high ceiling. So if you're willing to take a chance on a guy, I mean, that's someone that I would do it on.
Now, the running back situation is kind of sticky here. I want you to plant your flag right now on which running back you would most prefer out of this offense.
Well, in a PPR league, I'm going to have to take Danny Woodhead. Just because of his pass-catching ability. And I think he's probably the most talented running back right now in the backfield. I like Kenneth Dixon a lot, but I expected more out of him last season and the chances that he got. He came on at the end of the season. But I think it's between Kenneth Dixon and Danny Woodhead. I don't really like Terrence West. I think Terrence West starts out maybe as the number 1 back, and Danny Woodhead just the pass-catching back, but I think that changes quickly. And I think I'm not sure if Danny Woodhead's going to be the starter. I think they keep him in third down situations, but I think he gets enough carries this season where if he stays healthy, I like him out of the backfield.
Yeah, I do like Danny Woodhead the most. He's actually, out of the 3, Danny Woodhead's actually going the earliest, according to ADP, is back in the 7th round. I still like him there because he is the real pass-catching back on this team. I don't think people realize how many targets go to the running back in this offense because Flacco checks the ball down a lot. They had 156 targets to the running back. Now, that's also including Juszczyk, who is now gone. He leaves behind, I believe, it was like 49 targets last year. So, I mean, there's a lot of targets for Danny Woodhead to gobble up there. The year before that, they had 175 targets to running backs. So I definitely see him being an asset. Kenneth Dixon, he showed that he wasn't really efficient catching the ball last year. He caught 30 passes. He only got 162 yards. That's like 5.5 yards a catch. Like, I don't think they're going to try to use him that way this year. Him being suspended for 4 games could kind of hurt him. He could kind of lose a step in the depth chart. Like you said, I do think that Terrence West is going to start at the beginning of the year, but he's not going to hold on to that job. But I'd probably draft him over Kenneth Dixon at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be a tough one for me. Just because I think Kenneth Dixon's more talented, but you know, you got to go with the starter. You can't take a chance on a backup ahead of the starter.
All right. Dennis Pitt, how old is he? I feel like he's like 40.
I don't know. He broke
like 30,
out.
He's actually like 31 or 32, but he actually, he actually had 86 catches last year, but he didn't score like any touchdowns. Like, I think he's okay in PPR, but he's like a low ceiling, like fringe type of tight end. I mean, I guess you could take him as like a late flyer, but not a guy I would want as my starting tight end.
Yeah, me either.
All right. Anyone else you want to mention on his team, or can we move on?
No, I think we're good to go.
All right. Let's cover the Cleveland Browns. I I'm going to ask you right now. I ask everyone when talking about the Cleveland Browns, are you taking Corey Coleman or are you taking Kenny Britt? Who do you like more in this offense?
That's a tough one. Kenny Britt, I think, gosh, that's hard. Kenny Britt had a better season last year. But Coleman, I think Coleman, they're going to want to work him in the offense more, just being the second-year guy. They drafted him so high. He was the first receiver taken. And so I think he'll probably do better, but it's really a toss-up. Like, Kenny Britt could easily have a better season, and I'm a little more worried. I know Kenny Britt's had a long history of injuries, but he stayed healthy recently, and I'd be a little more worried about Coleman's injuries than I would Britt's. But just from the talent factor and if they utilize him correctly, I think Coleman should do better this season than Britt.
Kenny Britt had over 1,000 yards last year with Jared fucking Goff throwing him the ball. Like, that's pretty impressive to me. But
yeah, and I like Kenny Britt.
I think he is a 1B, and Coleman's going to be the 1A. I like Corey Coleman as a breakout candidate. I really do. Look at all the targets Terrell Pryor soaked up last year as the number 1 over there. I think that could be Corey Coleman. I like that. He was actually he showed some flashes. He was doing pretty decent before he broke his hand. Once he came back from his hand injury, Pryor had complete control of the targets, and he didn't record over 50 yards in a single game after breaking his hand. Fresh start. I'm not worried about that. I think that he's going to be the number 1 receiver in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think he will end up being the number 1 receiver, and he's obviously got the most upside. I don't think you'll see that kind of production out of Britt this year. Even though he caught a lot of those passes from Goff, but I think most of them he caught from Case Keenum, and Case Keenum is not good. Everyone knows that, but he does have a little bit of gunslinger. He does have a little bit of gunslinger in him, so he would throw it downfield and give Britt those chances, and I don't know how many of those he's going to get in Cleveland.
I mean, Cody Kessler, he's not known for having a real strong arm, but maybe he can work him a little bit more, on the outside, maybe not deep down the field, but maybe like 10-yard out routes or something like that. I don't see Kenny Britt being a top 25 receiver this year. I can't buy into that.
Yeah, I don't see him being top 25 either.
All right. Have you been one of the people that have been buying into the Isaiah Crowell hype?
No, not really. There was a little bit of it's a lot more this year. There was a little bit of that last year, but I'm not going to be in real high on any Cleveland Browns running back until they get someone who I can trust. I mean, Isaiah Crowell is not terrible, but that's not someone who I'm going to really look for in this draft. If he falls to me, great, and I'll take him, but I think he's going to go a little too early for my liking.
Last month in April, I loved Crowell. Fast forward to May, his ADP is nearly jumped 2 rounds. Now I don't like him. He's going in the middle of the 4th round. That's too rich for me to draft a Cleveland Brown running back in the middle of the 4th round. Could he have a good season? Sure. They built up their offensive line, but there's a good chance that they could be losing a lot this year. And you kind of seen it towards the end of last year. His workload kind of went down towards the end of last year, and I'm just not sure how much opportunity does he have to score 7 touchdowns again. I'm still puzzled how he averaged nearly 5 yards a carry last year behind this offense. That blows my mind. Would you be surprised if I told you that Crowell had 40 receptions last year?
Yeah, that would surprise me a little bit.
He had 40. He only had 13 less grabs than Duke Johnson.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I'm not real high on any of these running backs. If I had to choose one, I'd probably take like a late flyer on like Duke Johnson. But I mean, he obviously disappointed a lot of people last year. Would he go like the 5th round or something like that?
Yeah, he went early. I don't remember. Both of them went kind of early, which I didn't really get. That's just one of those. There's just a certain there's different positions around the league that I like to stay away from on certain teams, and Browns running backs are one of those.
Actually, Duke Johnson, he finished as RB27 in PPR leagues, but I felt like he was one of those guys that finished high enough to be a fantasy asset, but I probably would have never have started him because I wouldn't feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah.
All right. David Njoku, he's probably going to be their starting tight end. I don't think he's going to be really relevant this year, though.
Yeah, I don't really like anybody on the Browns that much. I'm going to stay away from them if I can. If one of them falls to me, I'll take them. I honestly I like Njoku best out of the skill position players of ones I would want to have, just because he's going to go late, and
he'll probably go.
It's possible that he comes in and takes over that Gary Barnidge role from 2 years ago. I mean, you never know. I don't think he will, but the Browns have had a history of decent fantasy tight ends. That's kind of surprising. But that's someone who I'd be okay as maybe a backup tight end in a league. But I'm not too high on him. I think I was really high on him coming out of Miami, but going to the Browns made me not like him as much. But I think he'll be good in the future.
He's a beast. He's a dog now. I do like him, just not this year.
Yeah.
One last question before we move on from the Browns. Will DeShone Kizer start at any point this year?
I would have to guess yes. If he was on the Jets, I'd say no, just because I know how the Jets do with their rookie quarterbacks. They don't let them play no matter how much people may want them to. I really do think Kizer starts at some point this season. They threw Kessler into the fire pretty early last year. That was out of necessity because of the injuries, obviously, but I could see Kizer starting, especially if Kessler comes out and does really bad. But if Kessler comes out and is playing okay, they're not expected to be good this year. So if Kessler comes out and plays okay, then I don't think Kizer gets any playing time. But if Kessler comes out and just plays awful, then I think the Browns want to see what they've got.
I really don't think Kessler was really that bad last year. He completed over 65% of his passes. He kind of reminds me of Andy Dalton. I would like to see him start all 16 games. I just don't think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way he starts week 1 unless there's an injury or he just has like a Russell Wilson type preseason. But I think he could be their quarterback of the future. But I think we're going to have to wait a little bit to really find that out.
All right. That'll do it for the AFC North. Let's go over to the East. The New England Patriots. Obviously, they win that division every year. Tom Brady, obviously, his ADP is too rich for me. He's going in the middle of the 3rd round. I get why, but he's probably not a guy I would own at this point.
Yeah, I like Tom Brady. I was someone who I've drafted him the last 2 seasons because he was just so late. And I went into the draft like, I'm going to get Tom Brady. I'm going to draft him a round earlier than he's expected to go, and I'm going to get a steal, and that's what's happened. So I've liked Tom Brady in the past, but I'm also
you
someone
finally have to pay the price.
Yeah, I'm someone who gets running backs early and kind of waits on wide receivers, and I kind of do the same thing for quarterbacks. I don't like drafting a quarterback in the first 5 rounds. I like to wait for a guy like Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, someone like that who may fall to me.
I think last year the guy that kind of fell a little bit past where he should have gone was Drew Brees. I seen him going in like the 6th round a lot. I think he was a league winner for a lot of people. How do you see? Who do you think is the biggest threat to the Patriots in this division?
Nobody. But out of the fight for second, I think the Dolphins have got second place. I don't think anybody's going to challenge New England. The only chance they'd have is if Brady got hurt, and even then I think the Patriots still probably win that division. I think the Dolphins season last year was a bit of a fluke. What they end up 11-5, 10-6, something like that.
I think they finished 10-6. I think it was either 10-6 or 9-7 actually.
Yeah, they might have. Yeah, I remember because it might have been 9-7 actually. But I think them making the playoffs last year was a little bit of a fluke. I do like Adam Gase. I think he's going to help out Tannehill, and their offense is good enough to win them some games. Their defense was supposed to be really good a couple of years ago. They signed all those free agents, but has fallen off a little bit, and they're not nearly as good as they had hoped to be. So I think if they could shore up the defense, then maybe they could have a shot at the playoffs again. But I think this is going to be another season where the Patriots just run away with it, and everybody else is finishing 8-8 or something like that.
Could not agree more. Now, I want you to plant your flag in the New England backfield. Which one? They got like 5,000 running backs. Which one do you like the most?
Can I choose nobody for that one too? I really liked Mike Gillislee last year with Buffalo. I was someone who got really excited. Not that he got hurt, but I was excited for the opportunity when LaShawn McCoy got hurt because I just loved Mike Gillislee, and he disappointed me last year. Just from the standpoint of I thought he was going to win me my league. I thought McCoy was going to be hurt, and then he was going to come on and just win the job and be great. But that didn't happen. But I still think he's really good. Yeah, I really think he's going to be good with the Patriots, but I don't think he's going to be fantasy good. I don't think he's going to put up a lot of numbers. I think it's going to be weird because, they really like Dion Lewis, and I think James White's going to be the odd man out. He's going to be the one who ends up fourth on the depth chart, I think. And I think the way the depth chart shakes out, I'm going to guess is they're going to let Gillislee start, and then they're going to have Burkhead and Dion Lewis just throughout the game coming in at random points and utilizing them in pass-catching situations. And, they like to throw out random running backs at first down. So that's why I don't like Gillislee or any of them really. But if I had to choose, I'd probably choose Gillislee just because I feel like he is going to be the one who sees the most snaps. I don't know how the touches will work out, but I think Gillislee will be on the field the most, and that's worth it enough for me because he could take over the LeGarrette Blount role as the goal line back. So if that's the case, I think he's going to get a lot more touchdowns than the other guys, and for that reason, that's why I would probably take him.
I mean, looking at the running backs on this roster, none of them besides Mike Gillislee fit that prototypical in-between the tackle type of runner. I think that's what they're going to use him for. And Patriots, they play with the lead a lot, so they're going to want that when milking the clock. He had 8 touchdowns last year as a backup, so he definitely has a high touchdown appeal. But if you're expecting him to have a LeGarrette Blount type of season and you're drafting him for that reason, you could be a little bit disappointed. But he's still only going in the middle of the 8th round. I love that ADP for him because you could potentially be getting a starting running back in the 8th round. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
I mean, Rex Burkhead, he's more of like a utility guy. I don't see him having really even being fantasy relevant, in my opinion. James White, he's more of like a satellite back, and he's gonna game flow is gonna hurt him. I mean, there's not a lot of times where you're gonna think, oh man, New England's probably gonna lose this game. I should start James White.
Yeah, that's someone who I just really don't think James White is going to see much time this season. No matter how big a lead they got, unless someone's hurt, that'd be the only way. But yeah, I think James White becomes damn near close to irrelevant this season.
Dion Lewis was actually, I think he could be the X factor because, like you said, they do seem to like this guy. The only thing is he's injury prone, and he actually looked pretty bad last year.
Yeah, I was disappointed. That was someone who I picked up when he was getting close to returning from the PUP, and I was disappointed with his production. But they do like him. But they wouldn't have went out and signed Rex Burkhead and Gillislee if they thought he could be a starting running back. So I think
Burkhead
he
is an insurance policy.
You think Burkhead is going to be behind Dion Lewis in the depth chart?
I think that. Yes, I think that he is the insurance policy, but I don't think Lewis is going to be back next year. Yeah,
I don't know. I just think I could see Burkhead getting a lot of time there. Maybe it's just because he's white. I don't know. But he just did a lot. He did a lot more with the Bengals than I thought he would whenever Gio went down, and so he's one who the Patriots could really get a lot out of, but they do like Dion Lewis, so I could easily see him being the second running back.
Let's just admit it. We don't know shit about this backfield. We don't know what's going in Bill Belichick's head. But when Burkhead was with Cincinnati, he showed a little something, and he showed me enough to where I wanted to pick him up on my dynasty team. I just stashed him. I didn't know what was going to happen to him, and then when I heard that he was going to the Patriots, my first initial thought was, oh, they're going to cut Dion Lewis, but that did not happen. So I honestly don't know what's going to happen in this backfield. Let's go over to the wide receivers. Obviously, they made a big blockbuster trade with Brandon Cooks. Do you see him playing in the slot, or do you see him playing as an outside receiver? Me personally, I think that he's going to be an outside receiver in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, they like to move around Edelman and let him play the slot and play outside, but I think it's going to shake out where they're going to utilize Brandon Cooks a lot of different ways. I think you're going to see some rushes from him. Because Danny Woodhead had a lot of those last season, like the sweeps, and I don't know. I'm worried about Brandon Cooks because of how high he's going in the draft. He's someone who I could see just having a crazy good season, but I'm worried about how him and Edelman are going to be on the field together. But if he plays the slot and Edelman plays outside, or Edelman plays the slot and he plays outside, I think they both put up solid production, but I think one of them really sees a hit in their receptions this season. And I think that could end up being Brandon Cooks just because of how much Edelman and Brady have played together and know each other so well.
Well, if you look back to how Brandon Cooks was used in New Orleans, he wasn't used all that much in the slot, especially deep down the field. A lot of his deep passes came when he was like an outside receiver. They didn't use him a whole lot on like quick crossing passes, which I think he could be very deadly at. And as we've seen last year, Julian Edelman was very inefficient. He was one of the least efficient receivers last year, but he was a target monster.
Yeah,
the question is, how many targets will he cede to Brandon Cooks? Because he had, 160 targets last year. Brandon Cooks only had 117 because Drew Brees is notorious for spreading the ball out. The question is, how many targets will Brandon Cooks get in this offense?
Yeah, that's tough to say. I mean, him and Edelman aren't both going to get 150 targets. That's just not going to happen. So I think Edelman probably ends up, he's going to take a dip in targets. I think Edelman probably ends up around 140, 130, something like that in targets. And I think Cooks probably has around 120, something like that. and I think he has. I think Cooks has a better season just because I think he's going to score more touchdowns. But I think Edelman's going to catch more passes, and I think Brandon Cooks definitely has a better year. But in terms of where he's drafted, I'd be cautious of him at the end of the second round. I'd probably try to wait and see if he falls. If I could get him in the middle of the third or into the third, I'd be pretty happy.
I think every day from now on until the start of the season, I'm just going to have everyone I know to start posting negative propaganda against Brandon Cooks to bring his ADP down a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess the last guy we can mention is Gronk. I mean, the other receivers, they'll be contributors, but they're fighting for scraps at this point. Is the back of the second round, is that too rich for Gronk?
For me, it is definitely.
Yeah,
like
I kind
I
of
said
seen your
earlier,
answer coming.
I don't take tight ends that early. But I mean, if you're someone who loves the tight end, and that's a position where there's only a few of them that are really game changers, and if you want one of those, I mean, go for it. But I'd probably, if you're wanting a really great tight end, I'd just wait and draft Travis Kelce a little later. But yeah, second round just a little too high for me on Gronk. If I was putting him, I'd probably put him into the third.
All right. Any thoughts of Dwayne Allen as a red zone threat?
Yeah, I think he definitely is. I was interested when I saw that they got him. It's just always interesting when tight ends go to New England because you just always expect them to be great. But I was disappointed last season in Martellus Bennett.
Yeah, I think the Patriots, they like two-way guys as their second tight end. They like guys that can block but still be a red zone option.
Yeah.
Let's go over to Buffalo. We're kind of we need to pick up the pace a little bit. We're already over an hour into the show. One of my favorite values is on Buffalo this year is Tyrod Taylor. He finished as quarterback 7. He's going near the back of the 12th round. He's going after guys like Carson Wentz, Eli Manning, and Andy Dalton. I think he has an awesome ADP because every year it seems like he somehow magically ends up as a QB1, and it's like people are like, well, how do you do that?
Yeah, I do like Tyrod Taylor. The Bills don't seem too excited with him though, so he's someone who, like you said, where he's at in the draft, he'd be a great value pick. But I'm just not too high on any of the Bills' offensive players.
If you look at the moves that this organization has been making, you can understand why it's been a very long time since this team has made the playoffs.
Yeah.
LaShawn McCoy finished as RB4 last year. He's going towards the back of the first. He's getting up there in age, though. His carries were kind of reduced because of Gilsey last year, but it made him more efficient. He had 13 touchdowns and almost 1,300 yards, and he had 7 100-yard games. But do you see any regression from him in terms of touchdowns? 13's a lot.
Yeah, he worries me. That's someone who I've generally stayed away from the last 2 years just because he just worries me with his age now, and I'm always worried he's going to get injured, even though he hasn't really been that injury-prone in his career in terms of missing extended time. But at the back of the first, like, if a guy like Mike Evans is available, I know I said I like getting my running backs out of the way, but if a guy like Mike Evans is there, and if it's between Mike Evans and LaShawn or A.J. Green and LaShawn, I'd probably take one of them. But I think he has another good season, but you could see him regress a little bit because at some point his age is going to show.
Yeah, I have a rule when playing redraft when it comes to running back. It's better to be a year early before they dive off the cliff than a year too late. I'm not saying that with McCoy, but I mean, I'm not a guy that likes to take running backs in the first round unless it's one of the big three. Like, I just don't see myself drafting him at the back of the first.
Yeah, I'd stay away from him. But there could be a big drop off between, like, I'd take LaShawn McCoy over Jordan Howard and Devontae Freeman and DeMarco Murray. So I mean, if you're really needing a running back,
you would take McCoy over Freeman, right?
Yeah, I do like Freeman, but I think I was
about to ask you that because I have Freeman ranked as my number 4 running back right now. I do like McCoy. I got him as my number 5, but I mean, I'm just saying I think I like Freeman a little bit more.
Yeah, what I'm used to doing in fantasy is just the standard redraft. I haven't really done much PPR just because that's just not what my friends did. I've done a few, but with my running back rankings, I had Marshawn Lynch at 4, but that's a lot different with PPR. So I do like I'd probably have McCoy at 4 in my PPR league, and then Freeman at 5. So I mean, it's just really pick your poison. Like if you're worried about McCoy getting hurt or his age, then I'd go with Freeman. But if you're worried about Tevin Coleman in the backfield, I'd go with McCoy.
No, I think actually, well, I don't want to get too much off topic, but I think Coleman actually helps Freeman out. Let's go. Let's go over to. You said you're worried about McCoy because of his age. So are you likely to try to snag Jonathan Williams, whether or not you own him or not?
Probably not. I try. That's probably not going to be one of the backups I go for. If I'm going to go for a backup, I'm going to try to get one that's going to have a chance at the starting job that's going to like split carries. But if you're going for one of those, you're going to have to probably draft a little higher. So I don't do too much in the way of handcuffs when it comes to drafting, but like in free agents, once it comes around, like I might look at someone like that.
I mean, Sammy Watkins, are you taking a chance on him? He's going a little bit early for me, 4th round, and I'm just so worried about it because he's always hurt. Are you taking a chance on him there?
No, probably not. That's someone his injuries are obviously a big thing, but I've just never really been that high on him as a fantasy talent. I like him a lot as a football talent, but in terms of fantasy, he's just never really done it for me as high as he always goes. But he's going around the same time as guys like Alshon Jeffrey, Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Demaryius Thomas. So, I mean, I'd rather have him than probably Devontae Adams, but I'd probably take Demaryius Thomas, Allen Robinson, and Alshon Jeffrey over him.
Yeah, those are all better options because, one, they're more consistent, and they're all more healthier than him besides Alshon. I've been on the Sammy Watkins train the past 2 years. It worked out 1 year. It did not work out last year. I'm done, fit downers. No more Sammy Watkins on my team. Zay Jones, I know we just talked about him having a little knee injury. Are you taking a late flyer on him, or is this offense just not good enough to support 2 receivers?
I do like Zay Jones as a talent. I think he's going to be good. I don't think he'll be that good in Buffalo. I think it'll be a few years before you really see him break out. But, yeah, I would not – I'd stay away from him. I'd stay away from that whole receiving core probably. But I don't see him really making much of an impact this season.
All right. There's no tight end to really speak of in Buffalo. So let's go over to Miami. Ryan Tannehill. Have you heard anything about his ACL? I know it happened kind of late last year.
No, I was looking up something on the Dolphins the other day, and I saw something that said like he was progressing nicely or something like that. But they're going to say that. But that was someone I was impressed with him last season. He had a good year, and obviously brought him to the playoffs. And I think him being with Adam Gase will help him. I think Adam Gase is gonna do a lot for him. He's kind of known as like a quarterback whisperer, someone who can get the most out of their quarterbacks and can do a lot for the offense. And I think them being there this will be their second season together, so I think you could see some improvement out of him.
Yeah, it always takes an extra year or two when they get a new offense to fully integrate the system to get this offense where they want to get it. Because I was looking at Ryan Tannehill's downfield accuracy last year, it's not as bad as people think it was. It actually was one of the better ones in the league. So it does bode well for guys like Devontae Parker. Last year, though, seemed like this offense was running the ball more to mask how bad their defense was, and it really hurt the receivers on this team. Like Jarvis Landry wasn't really the same. I know if you look at the standings, the PPR standings, it wasn't that bad, but it was kind of a down season for receivers. Jay, that really got him a lot of hype going into this offseason. He's going in the middle of the second round. He had 260 carries and 8 touchdowns last year. Are you buying into Jay there?
I don't really, not really. I don't really like him that much. He's. I'm looking at the fantasy football calculator right now, and he's going ahead of Michael Thomas, Des Bryant, Todd Gurley, T.Y. Hilton, Lamar Miller, Rob Gronkowski, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Aaron Rodgers. Like there's just a lot of players that I would take ahead of him that are going behind him, and so
he's going
I
way
like
too
him
high
as
for
a
me.
talent. He's okay, but yeah, I'd stay away from that early. He's a candidate for a slump this season.
I have him as one of my bust candidates this year. He had 1,000, almost 1,300 yards, but he had 3 200-yard games last year. Outside of those 3 games, he only had one other game over 100 yards. Nearly half of his yardage came in those 3 games. So he screams bust all over for me. Yeah, thank you, Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Buffalo gave up 3 200-yard rushers too, because I think Pittsburgh did it to him too.
Yeah.
I know we briefly mentioned him, Jarvis Landry. He's in a PPR league, he's one of those guys that will consistently get you 10 to 12 points. He's not going to be the reason why you won, but he's a decent little piece to put in there. I wouldn't want him as like my wide receiver too, but if he's like my 3rd or 4th receiver, I'm liking it.
Yeah. That's someone who I do like, but I just tend to stay away from those receivers because they worry me a little bit. But he's someone who'll get you a lot of receptions, and so that's always valuable.
I mean, would you take Jarvis Landry or Devontae Adams?
I know I'm a Packers fan, a big Packers fan, but I tend to.
That's why I'm doing it.
I tend to kind of be think the lowest of my own players. Like I get, because I see him all the time and I get frustrated with him. And Devontae Adams is someone who is just going ridiculously high for me. I think he's going to disappoint a lot of people this season just because of where he's going. He had a good year last year, but a lot of that came in like 2 or 3 games, and people don't really realize that.
33% of his catches came in like 2 or 3 games.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's someone I'd go with Jarvis Landry there. He's going to get a lot more catches, and he's probably not going to get more touchdowns, but I think he'll definitely have more yards. And so I think that's a pretty easy choice for me with Landry.
Would you go Jarvis Landry or Alshon Jeffrey?
That's tough. I want to see how Jeffrey does in the new offense, but, I mean, don't have the luxury of that when you're going into a draft. So just out of pure talent, I'm going to go with Alshon Jeffrey just because I think he is better than Jarvis Landry. I like Tannehill more as a quarterback who can who's going to put up better stats than Wentz. So, it's really tough. Wentz could have a really good season, and if Wentz has a really good season, then I think that's largely because of Alshon. So I think Alshon will have a good season too. So I will go with Alshon there, but that one's pretty close.
All right. I want to do one more before we move on from Landry. Landry or Demaryius Thomas?
That's another tough one. Demaryius Thomas, I think, again, is more talented. But in this case, he just worries me with he's got Trevor Siemian throwing to him, and I don't like that much. I know Siemian wasn't horrible last year, but he's just someone, he had such a down year, and he's got Emmanuel Sanders to compete with in terms of targets, and they just don't throw the ball that much. So I think I'd have to go with Jarvis Landry in that case.
I think out of all the receivers I just named, I think Demaryius Thomas is the only receiver I probably would take over Landry. Those are all the receivers that Landry's kind of going around, trying to get a feel for how much you liked him. If you're not big on Landry, are you big on Parker?
Not really. I'm higher on Landry. I do like Landry in a PPR, but I just think with the reason I chose Alshon was just because I think Alshon's just a good bit more talented, and I think he'll go for more touchdowns.
If he could stay healthy. Then I guess we'll go on to the New York Jets. Now, this is a team that's not going to be very good this year. Their quarterback is Josh McCown. Like, what else do I have to say? Their quarterback is Josh fucking McCown. Like, they're in trouble. Actually, no, I forgot to ask you a question. Do you think this is a make it or break it year for Tannehill?
No, I think he gained himself another year or two with his performance last year. I mean, they made the playoffs for the first time since Tom Brady has been there, has been starting. But the only other year they made the playoffs was the year he was hurt. And so I don't think this is a make it or break it year. I think he gained himself at least another season, I think, because of what he did last year. I mean, if he comes out and he just performs awfully and people just understand that he's not the future, then, yeah, maybe they'll look to move him. But I think he'll probably be the quarterback there for at least another 3 or 4 years.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an iffy situation because of the knee injury, so we'll have to see. Now, how high are you on Bilal Powell? Do you think that he's going to be the starter for the Jets this year, or do you think that Matt Forte is going to kind of linger around and cut into his workload?
I think Matt Forte probably starts out the season as the starter, but I think Bilal Powell, especially in PPR, is going to be more valuable. And I do like him. I mean, he seems really talented. The few times I've watched him play, my roommate is a Jets fan, so I've watched the Jets more than I'd like to admit. But Bilal Powell, I mean, he looks like he could be someone who is valuable, but you just never know in an offense like that. But if he's getting 25 touches a game, I mean, that's someone who's going to be super valuable if he ends up, like, if he's starting and he gets 25 touches a game. And I think he will at some point take over from Matt Forte as the starter this season. I think it'll probably be pretty early, too, because they're going to realize really fast how bad they are. And then so they're just going to want to see what they've got in all their guys.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of seen who Bilal Powell is. It seems like he's a guy where they like to use him later on in the season. They never seem to just give him the keys right away. But every time he's on the field, he looks very efficient. I think he's going right around the 6th round right now, and I don't think that's a bad spot for him at all.
Yeah, I mean, that seems about right. That's someone who, since he is a backup right now, or at least I presume he's a backup right now, I'd be a little worried. I might go at that spot with a guy, like if I've got a pick early in the 6th round, if a guy like Cam Newton is still there, I may go with him because I think he's in for a good season this year. But yeah, Bilal Powell, I mean, he's got guys around him, Amir Abdullah, Derrick Henry,
Christian McCaffrey.
So I mean, out of those players, yeah, I think him or McCaffrey probably has the best season out of those guys. I mean, if Abdullah starts and performs well and gains himself like a right to be the starter for the season, then I mean, yeah, I think he could end up being the best out of that group. But right now, I'd probably take Powell.
Yeah, I got a campaign going on Facebook, or not Facebook, but Twitter right now for this year. The campaign is Fear Amir 2017. I think that he's going to be great, so I probably would not take Powell over Amir Abdullah. But I mean, other guys like maybe like Derrick Henry and Ty Montgomery, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Eric Decker, I mean, he's presumably their number one receiver. There's been reports that he will not be cut. He's going to be a number one receiver this year for the Jets. We've seen him as a number one before with a bad quarterback, and it wasn't horrible.
Yeah, I mean, he's better than I think he gets credit for. But that being said, I still probably don't like him that much this season. I think they try to work in guys like Ryan Anderson and Anunwa more this season. And, you know, Decker's had some injury problems, and you never know. So, I mean, if you're gonna get someone in, like, Jets receiving core, Decker's the guy to do it, but I still don't like him that much.
Who was that other quarterback that they started last year towards the end of the season that was constantly targeting Robbie Anderson? Like, if he ends up becoming the quarterback, because you know McCown's going to eventually lose it, that could be a decent little guy right there, Robbie Anderson.
Yeah. The quarterback, Bryce Petty, is who the
that's that
was.
fucker, yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, he relentlessly targeted Robbie Anderson towards the end of the year last year.
Yeah, they were practice squad buddies, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I think this season they're going to end up starting Christian Hackenberg at some point, just because a lot of people were wanting him to start last season at the end of the year when it was obvious that Bryce Petty wasn't going to be the answer. And so McCown, I mean, it seems like McCown gets hurt every season. So, I mean, I think at some point Hackenberg's probably going to start, and I think he's going to be bad just like the rest of their quarterbacks. But that's why I don't really like any. I just don't trust any of their quarterbacks, and I don't trust their receivers really.
I feel gross and I feel dirty talking about the Jets. I don't want to do it no more. So let's move on to the next team. I know we're forgetting one team here in the East. No, we talked about the Dolphins. We talked about the Jets. Actually, we're done. Aren't we?
We're done.
All right, let's go over to the AFC South. Last year, the Texans were the champs. Who do you see them repeating as champions this year?
No, I think the Colts come back and get it.
By who?
I think they're just the Colts.
You think the Colts will take it?
Yeah, I just think they're the best team, and you know, I don't trust the Texans at all. I think the Titans are actually probably going to be better than the Texans. Maybe not this season, but definitely next season. But the Colts, I just feel like the Colts are the best team. They've got easily the best quarterback in the division. And I know they don't have great skill guys other than T.Y. Hilton. And I know their defense isn't great, but I think Luck comes back and has a bounce-back year. And I think he carries them to another AFC South title.
I could definitely see that happening. Do you have any concerns, though, about Andrew Luck with his shoulder surgery? He said it was from a lingering injury back in 2015. I believe it's on his throwing shoulder.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to be worried about because, I mean, you're always worried when a quarterback hurts his shoulder. But, I mean, he's just so talented, and I think if he can, like, I'm a little.
I just don't get why they waited so long.
Yeah,
I'm not worried about it. I just feel like they waited too long. Why wait so long? The injury happened in 2015. If you look at his numbers from 2014, he was 11-5. Their team was 11-5. He had a 96.5 passer rating, a 40-16 touchdown interception ratio, and then the past 2 years they have a losing record. So I think obviously it's been affecting his play a little bit. I know last year he really toned it down and didn't turn the ball over as much, which was nice to see, and he had a pretty nice season. So I really do like Andrew Luck going into this season. I don't know if I'd draft him, though.
Yeah, I'd be a little wary of drafting him. You know, you've just got – the thing with quarterbacks is, like I said earlier, like you've just got so many quarterbacks, like good quarterbacks that go late in the draft. And so it's probably more worth it.
You see it every year.
Sure up. a different position than go for a big quarterback. Because, I mean, you never know. Like, Aaron Rodgers has been the number one fantasy quarterback, but you saw how close he was to having, like, if he had kept playing like he did the first half of the season or the team had, I mean, he would have ended up being a pretty big bust for people that were taking him at the end of the first round and the beginning of the second. So, I mean, you run such a risk when you draft a quarterback that high. And so I'd just probably wait until later to draft Andrew Luck, or instead of drafting Andrew Luck.
Yeah, see, I'd rather just gobble up like 5 or 6 running backs and receivers and then go for your quarterback. But I think my sweet spot is like after the 10th round, you got Matthew Stafford, you got Tyrod Taylor. I kind of like those two. Those are my two like sweet spot quarterbacks that I kind of like.
Yeah.
Now the receivers. Do you think Moncrief could be more than just a red zone threat?
I mean, you never know. Like, he played pretty good with him, and he had flashes of looking like he was going to be a solid fantasy receiver. But he's someone who I just don't trust. Could he be more than just a red zone target? Yeah, but I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to keep relatively the same role he's had, and he's still got the injury problems. So, I mean, that's someone who I'd probably stay away from when I'm going into a draft.
I just don't think they use him right. I don't think, because he does have some speed. I think he has like 4 or 5 speed. They don't open him up. Like you said, he has the injury concerns. I think that they brought in Kamar Aiken to be like his insurance policy. I think that's all Kamar Aiken is going to serve for. He's not some guy you should be excited about. We all know. I think I'm going to call it right now. Philip Dorsett's a bust. It never made sense why they drafted him in the first round to begin with. Really, the only concern I have with this offense is the line. Really, I love Ty. I gotta find a way to get Ty on my team this year. What can we expect from Frank Gore though?
You never know with him. I mean, he's someone who, what is he, 34 now? 33?
The dude won't die. No, I think he's like 52 or something like that.
I think they give him the ball. I mean, he gets enough carries where he's worth a look if you're needing a running back. But players like Frank Gore are the reason that I try to get my running backs out of the way early, so I don't have to get stuck with someone like that if I wait too long. Just because you just never know with someone that, like, it's pretty unprecedented to have a starting running back who's still pretty relevant to be this old. And so you just don't really know. That's someone who I'd be worried about.
I know that they drafted Marlon Mack, but I don't necessarily see Marlon Mack as a consistent in between the tackle runner. I see him more as like a dasher and a third down guy. That to me that's how I view him. I don't really necessarily see him as like a huge threat to Gore's workload. He will cut into it a little bit, however.
Yeah. I think he's going to cut in a little bit. And I was just looking here at the draft where Frank Gore is going. He's going around the same time as players like Rob Kelly, Deshaun Jackson, Danny Woodhead, Paul Perkins. And I'd probably take all of them before I would take maybe I'd be worried about Rob Kelly just because of Perrine coming in. But
I could see him
like Danny Woodhead
dropping.
Yeah, and I really like Paul Perkins this year. I don't know why. I know he hasn't done that great, but that's someone who I just think the Giants have just been longing for a run game, and if he can come in and give them and show some flashes, I think he could easily gain their trust and gain that starting job all to himself and not have to worry about anybody.
Wait, where's Paul Perkins going?
Paul Perkins is going at the end of the 7th round.
Oh, so he's probably going to end up being somebody's running back that goes like 0 RB. which I'm okay with that. In a redraft, I'm okay with drafting Paul Perkins. If we're talking dynasty, I want nothing to do with him because he is as average can be. He does nothing great, but he doesn't do anything bad. He's just average.
Yeah. I just think he's someone that he's in an offense where he could end up getting a lot of carries. And so that late when you're going to get someone who could easily be a 3-down, like he could end up being their 3-down back. He's not going to be. But he's someone who could end up getting 20 carries a game. And, I mean, someone like that who has – I'd rather have someone young like that who's going to get about the same amount of carries as Frank Gore because I trust Perkins a little more than I do Frank Gore.
Jack Doyle, he's probably going to be on half of my teams this year because I hate drafting tight ends, so he's going nice and late. He's probably going to end up on a lot of my teams. I think that he could be pretty productive. The Indianapolis Colts, they throw to the tight end like 20% of the time in the red zone. So that's pretty good chances for him to get some touchdowns. I really like Jack Doyle. He's going pretty late. I'm going to look up his ADP right now. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I like him. I mean, he this has been a while now, but I'm pretty sure because I remember when we signed Martellus Bennett, they were talking about how he had the highest catch ratio among tight ends, and Jack Doyle was second. And so, I mean, he's someone who's got great hands, and, you know, Andrew Luck loves to throw the tight end, especially in the red zone. And so he's someone, if you've got a tight end with good hands who they like, I know they like Jack Doyle. They wouldn't have traded Dwayne Allen if they didn't. And so I think you should expect him to feel a big bump in production this year. And I think he's going to be a real steal.
Jack Doyle is going at the back of the 12th round. He's going at.
Yeah,
would you take Jack Doyle over Eric Ebron?
That's tough. I probably would, honestly, just because I feel like he's going to get more production. I feel like he's going to get more looks this season than Ebron does.
I would absolutely take him over Ebron. Lions do not target the tight end in the red zone. Would you take him over Cameron Brate?
Yeah, I would.
Can you believe this? O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate are both going before Jack Doyle, or O.J. Howard's going before Cameron Brate.
Yeah, I actually like O.J. Howard a little more than Cameron Brate this season, just because I feel like they're gonna want to go ahead and just let him go to work, and I think O.J. Howard's gonna be great. I did a rookie analysis thing for a website the other day, and I was talking about him, and I just think he's going to end up being the second or third.
Do you think he's already NFL ready?
I think he is. I mean, you know, you never know until you actually see him hit the field, but that's someone who I'm pretty excited about as a fantasy owner. And I'm probably not going to draft him this season just because I never know what rookies are going to do, how much they're going to be used. And having a good tight end like Cameron Brate, who had a good season, that worries me a little bit. But I think they're going to realize how good this kid is, and they're going to want to put him in as often as they can and get the ball in his hand.
All right, let's go over to the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, you know, Mariota had a great season last year. Are you at all concerned, though, about his ankle injury? Because he is a scrambling quarterback. That kind of worries me a little bit.
Yeah, you always have to worry with a mobile quarterback when they start hurting things on their legs. But, you know, I'm not.
Have you heard anything positive about the injury?
No, I haven't. I haven't really heard too much about the injury at all. I know they were expecting him to be fully healthy and recover, but he's an underrated passer, and he's very accurate. And so I think if he has to stay in the pocket a little more this season and use his legs less, I think he'll do it. He runs less than I think most people think he does. He's just a very good runner. He just doesn't do it as often as other mobile quarterbacks do. But
I think if he had to stay inside the pocket, it wouldn't really do a whole lot to him because he's probably, in my personal opinion, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks at manipulating defenses with his eyes. He just needs to work on his downfield throwing a little bit.
Yeah.
Is this the year where DeMarco Murray gets supplanted by Henry Derrick Henry?
I don't think so. I traded for DeMarco Murray last season, and I saw the writing on the wall that Henry was coming because I watched a lot of their games. And so I was desperately trying to trade DeMarco Murray because I didn't want him in the fantasy playoffs. But I had him anyway, and Derrick Henry was stealing all of his stuff. But I think they're going to use Derrick Henry a lot this season. But I still think Murray starts. They're going to want, like, when you've got an older running back like Murray with someone waiting in the wings as the obvious next starter, you don't want to use the young guy too much while you've got the other guy's body who you can beat up. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to
Yeah.
Running backs are so fragile and they last such a short period of time. You don't want to go ahead and waste a bunch of hits for your young guy when you can let someone who's very capable and still a really good running back go ahead and do that for you. And I think Henry is obviously going to be the starter, and I think that may happen next season, but I still think Murray gets the bulk of the carries this year.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't you just see like them running DeMarco Murray into the ground, and then they implement Derrick Henry next season?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I really could see that happening.
I mean, DeMarco Murray, he has a lot of qualities that you look for in a running back that you want to take in the first round. He's going in the beginning of the second round. I mean, this is a guy that caught 50 passes last year, so I mean, he's a nice little PPR asset on top of being in between the tackle type of running back. I mean, if I'm absolutely looking for like a top end talent, I wouldn't mind taking DeMarco Murray because they have a pretty good offensive line over there.
Yeah, it's funny. He could end up being a steal for a lot of people where he's at in the draft, but he could also
he was last year.
A bust. He could also end up being a bust for where he's at in the draft, just because if he does end up losing a lot of carries to Derrick Henry, he's not going to be worth that high of a pick. But if he doesn't and he performs like last season, then he's still going to be a steal.
Yeah, I mean he's going at the beginning of the second. Derrick Henry's going at the end of the sixth. I feel like that's too rich for Derrick Henry, though.
Yeah,
just because I don't believe in him taking over a high workload this year.
Yeah, he's in the same area like we were talking about earlier. Players like Ty Montgomery, Abdullah, Powell, he's going a little behind them. So I guess that's just where the running backs
where
we're
the
not
question
too sure
marks
about
go.
are going in this draft. Yeah.
All right, let's go over to their wide receivers. They just drafted Corey Davis. He's going to be presumably the number one receiver, but, I mean, do you think it might take him a little bit to get into this offense? We really don't know, like, a whole lot about Corey Davis because he hasn't been able to work out. He's been hurt.
Yeah, Corey Davis, I saw him going in a lot of dynasty drafts. I saw him going first overall in a lot of places, and I just didn't. I mean, I like Corey Davis, but I just didn't see that. I'd rather have a guy like Mike Williams, honestly. I think Mike Williams has a lot of upside to him, but that's just purely talking dynasty. I mean, this season, if he comes back healthy, I mean, he could be a much-needed weapon in that offense. I mean, he made Rashard Matthews look pretty damn good last season, and I think Corey Davis could fit in nicely to an offense that's desperate for a big wide receiver threat, but you just don't know. A player like that at a relatively small school for college coming in, you just don't know how he's going to perform, but they wouldn't have taken him at 5 if they didn't believe in him. So, I mean, I think he's probably going to be utilized a lot, but maybe not this season.
I mean, obviously, Rashard Matthews isn't just going to go away. Like, he's going to be a part of the offense, and this is one of those offenses where I think that they could have enough there to produce 2 startable wide receivers. Right now, Rashard Matthews is actually going before Corey Davis by 2 picks, or 2 or 3 picks. But I mean, which one would you rather have on your? Say we're doing a redraft right now. Like, who would you draft?
In a redraft, I'd have to take Rashard Matthews just because you're worried about Corey Davis this season. When rookies start out injured, they start out their careers like they don't go to training camp, things like that. A lot of times you see that carry over to the regular season where they take it slow, especially someone who was drafted that high. They're not going to want to rush him back when they know this. Like, they could make the playoffs this season, but they know this is their season. They know they're built for the future with Derrick Henry, Mariota, Corey Davis. So they're not going to want to just throw him in there. So I think Corey Davis has a lot more upside than Rashard Matthews, but I think Rashard Matthews is a much safer pick.
Because, I mean, really, Rashard Matthews last year, he started out real slow. And then out of nowhere, it just seemed like he was getting like a touchdown a week. So I don't really see that happening again this year. But he's going to be a part of that offense more than people think. And if people are taking Corey Davis ahead of him, they could be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I actually do have Corey Davis as my number one rookie wide receiver. But I just don't see a ton of yardage for him this year.
And this season, I mean, the rankings that I did was for Dynasty. For this season, I think Corey Davis probably has the best chance out of any of the receivers to have a good year. Just because, Mike Williams, I thought Mike Williams was the most talented wide receiver. I was so surprised that Corey Davis went before him. But he's in a place with such a plethora of wide receivers that he may not see the field as much this season. So for a redraft league, I would probably take Corey Davis first as my rookie receiver, yeah.
All right, let's go over to their tight end, Delanie Walker. He's a guy that a lot of people, sometimes they forget about it, but I know at 2015 he led all tight ends in receptions. I don't think he did that last year, but he is going at the beginning of the 6th round. He has the same ADP as Jimmy Graham right now.
Yeah, I like Delanie Walker. I think he's a steal where he's at right now. We talked about him earlier, how Tyler Eifert was going ahead of him, and I take Delanie Walker over him every time. Yeah, Delanie Walker is just so consistent, and he's just good. Like, he's one of those tight ends that every year you think he's going to fall off, and he just doesn't. And that's someone who, if you're wanting to wait a little bit to get a tight end, I mean, you can't go wrong here at the beginning of the 6th round with Delanie Walker. Him going with Jimmy Graham is interesting. I'd probably take Jimmy Graham just for the upside, but Delanie Walker, honestly, is probably more consistent, and he has a higher floor than Jimmy Graham does.
Higher floor, lower ceiling. He's more going to get you about 10, 12 points most weeks in PPR leagues. There'll be some weeks where Graham will explode, but there'll be some weeks where he's just not used, so I do like that take. Let's go over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is the last team in the NFC or the AFC South. Are you at all worried about this running game that they have?
I mean, I don't think it's going to be great, but I really do like Leonard Fournette, and I think he's gonna have a pretty great season this year. They said he's going to have to earn his starting job and all that nonsense, but he's going to be the starter. And I mean,
who else would you want running between the tackles over there?
Yeah.
You want Ivory between the tackles? Like, no.
And yeah, I just think Leonard Fournette is just going to be a great running back in this league. I loved him in redraft. Dynasty. I've got him as my number one overall rookie in Dynasty leagues. I'd probably put him as – actually, yeah, I would put him as my number one rookie in redraft leagues too. And he's just someone who has the chance – he's not going to put up the Ezekiel Elliott numbers. Like, that can't become the standard because that's not going to happen all the time. But I could definitely see him putting a solid 1,200 yards up this season and getting 7 or 8 touchdowns, which is just a great rookie season. And so I like him a lot this year.
I see a lot of similarities from Leonard Fournette situation to Todd Gurley's situation. They both have poor offensive lines, poor quarterback play. I'm not trying to say that that's going to happen, but that could be a situation for me personally I probably wouldn't want to be in.
Yeah, that's something I'd definitely be cautious of. But I still like him this season, but it's something that I might stay away from as well.
But it's absolutely absurd that the Jaguars would say he has to earn his starting role. Like, they're not going to put Chris Ivory in between the tackles, over Leonard Fournette. We know that Yeldon, he's not a guy that can go between the tackles. He's probably going to be a guy that can catch all the passes until Fournette can prove that he could be that type of running back. He might be still a couple of years away from. That's usually something that running backs tend to grasp onto year 2 or 3. So we'll see how that situation plays out. Allen Robinson had a down year last year. Do you think that this is a year where he's going to bounce back?
Yeah, I think he bounces back because, can't do much worse than he did last season in terms of expectations. So I think since the expectations are going to be so much lower this season, he really has a chance to surprise a lot of people and remind a lot of people how good he is. Because, we're just a year removed from this being someone who was taken in the top 15 of most drafts. So, that's someone who, he's going at the beginning of the 3rd round in most leagues right now. So I think that's a good spot for him. He's going around guys like Keenan Allen, Alshon Jeffrey, Demaryius Thomas. So, Keenan Allen, I think Keenan Allen is probably a little better and probably in a little better situation, but, those injuries you just have to be wary of. So I do like Allen Robinson this season. He's someone who is in for a bounce-back year, I think, and someone who I think could be a big value pick at the beginning of the 3rd round.
Do you think that he could be a wide receiver 1 this year?
I think he can be. I think, it depends on what your team looks like. He could be a wide receiver 1 on a team that's got Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley. You know what I mean? So, if you've got really good running backs, he could definitely be a wide receiver 1 for you. But if he's a wide receiver 2 for you, you're probably sitting really pretty when it comes to wide receiver.
Well, if it was my team, he'd be my wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Is there any other receivers on this team that you think could be fantasy relevant? Obviously, Allen Hurns, he fell off a cliff last year. When I think of the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, I think of it like a McDonald's commercial. Allen Robinson, he was an order that they messed up. It wasn't the correct order. Blake Bortles, he was kind of like a pea soup, meaning he literally peed in your soup. And Allen Hurns, he's like that awesome looking Big Mac that you see, but then when you go to order it, it's actually plastic. That whole offense was in disarray last year. I just don't know if there's another receiver on this team that can be fantasy relevant because of Blake Bortles.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think that anybody really sees that many targets. Well, they might see a lot of targets, but I don't think that anybody's going to put up big numbers this year. I think Allen Robinson, I think he's going to put up a 1,000-yard season, and he might have a few touchdowns, but in terms of the rest of the guys, I don't see it. Yeah, you just never know with the Jaguars receivers. But, yeah, I think Allen Robinson's the only guy I would even really think about drafting.
All right, yeah. I honestly, I don't even know who their tight end is. I really don't. So we're not going to talk about that. Let's go over to Houston. This is the last team in the South, then we can move on. Apparently Savage is going to be their quarterback, yeah?
Yeah, it looks that way. But
not too excited about it, but I think he'll be better than Osweiler.
It can't be much worse.
At least with at least with Savage under center, he was actually targeting Hopkins. Osweiler seemed like he was allergic to him. So I do like that aspect, like from fantasy-wise, like that's good for like DeAndre Hopkins owners because he was actually getting targeted like when he was the quarterback. So I do like that.
Yeah, he did do a lot. I remember that last season. He did a lot better with him, and he may have a little bit of this in him, but Osweiler, the thing with him is he just never threw it. Seemed like he never threw it past 9-10 yards. Like everything was just a short little pass. He was never throwing it downfield. And when you've got a receiver like DeAndre Hopkins, if just give him a chance at it, like it was painful to watch last season when he would be going downfield and you'd see Osweiler throw it and it would just land 5 yards in front of him. And it was just so frustrating. So DeAndre Hopkins is one of those candidates that could really, if you pick him and he has a great year, that's someone who's going to do a lot for your fantasy team just because where you're going to be able to get him at. But that's also someone who I'd be worried about drafting just because if Tom Savage is quarterback all year, I don't trust how that's going to look over a 16-game sample.
DeAndre Hopkins, he is a guy that really thrives with a high volume of targets. He very well may get that, but I'm not taking him at the back of the second. Like he's going before some guys that I like. Like he's going before. He's going before Doug Baldwin. He's going before Allen Robinson. I have more faith in Allen Robinson to have a bounce back season than I do DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, that one's gonna be close. I put those two really in the same boat. They're just so similar in terms of I think they're both really good receivers. They're just trapped by their quarterback.
Is there any other receivers on this team that you're excited for? Are you excited about Will Fuller?
No, I mean he had that good game last year to start the season. But I don't trust him. If I'm not going to trust DeAndre Hopkins, I can't feel right about trusting any of the other receivers. I do like Ryan Griffin. I think he'll be a decent tight end for somebody because he's just going to where he's going to go in the draft. Do you think he takes over
the starting role?
I do. I think they used him last season, and I think they were impressed with him last season. And he did a good job. Fedorowicz was good, but that's someone who I'm just not sure. I'm not sure if he it seemed a little odd to me just watching him play last year. I didn't watch him play much. He just seemed a little like, what's the word? I don't know the word I'm looking for here, but he just seemed a little like out of place in the offense. I don't know. He didn't seem like he fit into what they wanted to do. And I just think Ryan Griffin's more of the tight end they're going to use. And Fedorowicz, he had a little bit of injury issues towards the end of the season. So I think if I'm going to plant my flag in a tight end there, I'm going to do Ryan Griffin. But if they end up where they both get a lot of targets or they're both like splitting targets, then I'd probably stay away from both of them.
I mean, I don't know what the total would be or where they would finish if you combined both of their numbers together, but I bet you it would be a top 10 tight end.
Yeah. Yeah, they use an offense like that where they just don't throw it that deep. The tight end just gets utilized so often.
Now, the running back situation, it was a bit of a disappointment last year, especially because Lamar Miller. It seemed like his ADP really rose last year. I think it pretty much rose into like the back of the first round. And if you got him there, you're pretty disappointed last year. And now they drafted Donta Foreman. Sorry, excuse me. Do you think that he's going to cut into his workload like more than people would like?
I don't. I think because they still got Alfred Blue, and I think Donta Foreman at some point becomes the backup. But I'm not sure how soon that happens. I think Alfred Blue will probably start out as the backup, but he's not that good. He's had his starts, and he never really seems to do much with it. So I think Donta Foreman definitely ends up as the number 2 back, I think. But Lamar Miller, I mean, he had a bad season, but I think he's in for a bounce-back year, and I don't think Donta Foreman cuts into his too much. I actually had him really pretty low on my rookie rankings for Dynasty because just they signed Lamar Miller for 4 years. So, I mean, it could be a while before he's a starter.
If ever.
Yeah.
I think that the reason why they brought Foreman in there is to just he's going to take some carries away from Lamar Miller. If you look at Lamar Miller's workload last year, he had the most carries of his career, but he did not. I do not think, though, he could really deal with it. He's always getting nicked up. He was getting banged up, and I think they want to bring his workload down a little bit, because D'Onta Foreman, he brings nothing to the game in terms of catching the ball. Like, I think he had like 13 receptions in college or some shit like that. But so he's not gonna. That's not what they're gonna use him for. They're probably gonna use him for short yardage, maybe a little bit of goal line. That's about it.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the AFC West. Who do you like in this division?
This is a tough one. This is the most competitive division last year. I tend to go with the Raiders just because.
Some Raider love. I like that call. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, but that made me happy.
No, you're fine. Their defense has been so bad, but they've been trying to shore that up through free agency. I think their defense still is going to be bad this season, but, the addition of Marshawn Lynch, I think, is just going to be ridiculous for this offense because they've got – some people would argue their offensive line is better than Dallas's. I mean, that's a tough argument to make, but I think they've got the second best offensive line in the league. And Marshawn, we've never got to see him with a good offensive line. And so with the addition of him, and they still got Jalen Richard as a pass catcher, and Cooper and Crabtree and Carr, that's just such a good core of skill position players. And I think they're just going to be putting up too many points for teams to compete with. And I know they haven't played the best against the Chiefs. The Chiefs defense has done a lot to them, but, the Chiefs lost some key players in their defense this year, and I think that you're really going to see the Raiders exploit a lot of people's defense this year. I think they could end up being the top 3 offense.
Man, if K-Mill was here right now, he'd be arguing with you about this because he's a big Broncos fan, so I really wish he was here when you said that. That was awesome. I think even let's look at it from a low-end perspective. Let's say Marshawn Lynch, he puts up Latavius Murray-like numbers last year. Say he gets 800 yards and 10 touchdowns. I still like that. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know where he's going in terms of ADP, but even if he puts up Latavius Murray-like numbers, he'll be worth drafting.
I honestly think he's going to put up
better numbers.
I think he's going to rush for more. Yeah, I think he's going to, because Latavius Murray, I don't think Latavius Murray's that good. I think he was a product of a good offensive line. And I think Marshawn.
Trust me, they all know my hate for Latavius Murray.
Marshawn's had a year off, and people. I don't know if people have just forgot or what, but I still think he's going to be one of the best running backs in the league. I think he's going to get around 1,200 or 1,300 yards rushing if they give him the carry. I'm not sure if they're going to give him the amount of carries that he normally would get back in Seattle. But if he gets a lot of carries, I think he's going to end up putting up huge numbers this year. He just never got to be behind a good O-line, and I think this year he's probably going to put around 1,300 yards, and probably get around 10 or 11 touchdowns. And I think he's just going to end up being a great running back and probably end up about – I was honestly trying to decide if I thought him or Zeke was going to have a better year, just because I think Zeke's kind of a little bit of a down year. But I think Zeke probably still ends up doing a little better, but I think it'll be closer than people think.
Well, I thought you were about to say that Marshawn's going to have a better year than Zeke. I was like, man, save that for the hot take episode. Now, this receiving core, obviously, Amari Cooper is one of the best up-and-coming talents in terms of wide receivers. He is yet to finish higher than Michael Crabtree, though. Is this finally the year it happens?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. I thought it was going to be last year. But, yeah, I think this year he's just too good. And it's really been surprising how good Crabtree has done. Because I just didn't think he was that good of a receiver, but him and Carr really have a good rapport with each other. But I think this year Cooper probably gets it and becomes the like he already is the main guy. Like people know that, but in terms of stats, like he just hasn't put up the big numbers we've all been waiting for. But I think this season, you see a lot of times receivers in their third season really break out, and so this might be a big year for him.
I like Amari Cooper's game. He has good route running. He can get down the field. He's improved his hands a lot over the past couple of years now. The only thing is I think he has some holes in his short routes, short to intermediate routes. If he has a little bit of holes, sometimes he doesn't finish his routes. And I think maybe that's a reason why you don't see him get as many receptions as you would like. I think I would like Amari Cooper more in a standard league than I would in a PPR league.
Yeah. And I agree with you there. But I just think he's in line to kind of prove some people wrong. Because I think he's starting, like, everybody just assumed he was going to come in and be like Julio Jones and just be a great receiver. So I think he's got a lot. Who he is. Yeah, and he's not as good. You're right. That's not who he is. But I still think he could end up being a really good receiver in this league and someone who ends up going at like the beginning of the second round in a lot of draft leagues at some point in the future. But, this year this might be a good time, to snag him a little late and get someone who's a breakout candidate.
I mean, one thing I want to know is, like, why this guy doesn't get as much work in the red zone. I mean, he's not like necessarily a small guy. I mean, he's 6'1", so it seems like once they get towards the red zone, they don't look for him.
Yeah, and that's confusing too, like because they haven't had a big tight end. I mean, now they've signed Jared Cook, but it is weird, and maybe they'll try to utilize that more this season, but they just ran it so much in the red zone. Like Latavius Murray obviously had so many touchdowns, and
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I mean, you had that great offensive line. Why not?
Yeah. But I think you really start to see Amari Cooper's game start to kind of come full circle, and he starts to look more like your prototypical receiver that kind of does everything. And I think that does happen this year. Now he's still going pretty high in the draft. He's going towards the end of the second round. They've got him at 20 here. So I don't know if I like him that high. That's still really high. But I think there's a big drop-off between him and the next best receiver when it's Amari Cooper and then it's DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Cooks, Baldwin. So, I mean, I'd probably rather have Amari Cooper than those guys.
I'd rather, honestly, I think I'm a lot higher on Baldwin than most people, just because I feel like he's one of those consistent receivers.
Yeah, he is.
Obviously Michael Crabtree, he's been the red zone guy. I don't know. I don't know if he has what it takes to still be that number one receiver. I feel like Amari Cooper is going to really take off this year.
Yeah.
Derek Carr, have you heard anything about his leg? I heard he was doing just fine.
Yeah, I've heard that he's recovering well and he should be back to his normal self next year. He's someone who I like Derek Carr, but I was looking at some stats the other day from Kean Fahey on Twitter. He's someone who I really like to look at. He was talking about how Derek Carr had some of the most interceptable passes this season thrown that were dropped by DBs. And so, I mean, that's something that kind of worries me a little bit because I've followed this guy for a while, and he was saying the same thing. Not that I think he's going to do this, but he was saying the same things about Ryan Fitzpatrick after that good year he had with the Jets, about all the passes that could have been intercepted that weren't. And so, I mean, I think Derek Carr could be in line for a little bit of regression this season, but I still think the Raiders' offense is just too good. And I still think he'll be pretty good.
Derek Carr is not. Last year, Derek Carr was a guy that I was really targeting because I can't remember. I think they played the Chiefs in Week 17, and I was like, oh, that's good. That's one less elite defense he has to face. But this year he's going to have to play. He's going to have to play the Chiefs twice. He's going to have to play the Broncos twice.
Yeah.
That's a tough division to play quarterback in. I don't know
it really is.
how much success he's going to have next year. I mean, could he? I see him more as like a fringe like quarterback one, like towards the back, like 11 or 12.
Yeah, that's someone who I would draft. I would probably draft him as my starter, but I would make sure I had someone.
Man.
Yeah, make sure I have a good backup. I'd draft it. Make sure what I would do in that scenario is if I got Derek Carr, I'd probably go ahead and take a quarterback again a little earlier than I probably
Tyrod
should.
Taylor.
Yeah, like Tyrod Taylor or even like Andy Dalton or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And I also Eli Manning, someone I like late in the draft because as bad as he was last year, and I don't like Eli Manning, I really don't. But I think the addition of Brandon Marshall is going to be big for that offense, and getting Evan Ingram. I just think that Eli is one of those quarterbacks where he just has back and forth years. Like he'll have one season where he's really good, and then he'll be really bad. And he was really bad last year.
He's consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, and so I think this year might be a bounce-back year for him. And he's someone who's going to the beginning of the 11th round, and at that spot in the draft, I'd be happy with getting him.
Right. Let's go over to the Denver Broncos. Me personally, I feel like Simeon, he's going to keep his job. I don't think they're going to bring Lynch in as the starter this year. I think Simeon showed enough to where he can keep his job next year. I mean, he's obviously going to be the weakness of that offense. How much of his play do you think affects these wide receivers?
I think a lot. I mean, you could just see how much of a drop-off, like how really quarterback dependent. Well, not dependent, but you just saw how good they were when Peyton Manning was good, and then how much their numbers fell when Manning was starting to regress. And now with you saw both of their numbers regress last season in terms of they just both, like when they had Peyton Manning throwing the ball, there was enough to spread around between the two of them. But now there's going to be less. They don't throw the ball nearly as much, and they don't have nearly as good of a quarterback. So I don't like either of the receivers as much.
Yeah, who would have thought their numbers would go down by losing a Hall of Fame quarterback?
Yeah.
I tend to lean a little bit more towards Sand opposed to DT. It seems like DT has a limited route tree, and that's why I don't tend to care for him as much as I like a guy like Manuel Sanders, who he could do a little bit. He can go deep, he can go intermediate. I kind of like Emmanuel Sanders a little bit more. I got them both as like wide receiver twos, but I like Sanders more.
Yeah, I do like Sanders, especially in PPR, just because he's just someone who he's going to run a lot more like intermediate short routes that's going to be there for Simeon that he's going to like to throw. So I do like him. I'd probably stay away from Demaryius Thomas where he's at in the draft and just wait for Sanders if you're going to get one of those two.
Can you please plant your flag in this Denver backfield? They got Charles, they have Anderson, they also have Booker. Which one would you like to own, if any, at all?
I probably wouldn't like to own any of them. I mean, I've heard some things, people saying that Jamal Charles won't even make it out of the camp. And so, I mean, that's how the mighty have fallen. I mean, he was drafted in the third round or early in the third round of my draft last year, and that was a 10-team league. And so it's just funny to see how he's just fallen off so much. But
he's going in the 8th round this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to get Charles. I know that. They seemed to like Devontae Booker last season, but he really didn't perform well. And so I'm probably just going to go with C.J. Anderson just because that's who's been the starter before, and he's coming off an injury. So maybe he'll look to bounce back because he seemed to always do better when he had a good backup. like when there was someone, like back when Ryan Hillman would come in and play good, all of a sudden C.J. Anderson would start playing better. So I think C.J. Anderson probably has the best shot this year to be the most fantasy relevant, but in a backfield like that, I would just generally stay away from it.
I mean, if I absolutely had to pick somebody in this backfield, obviously I'm not picking Jamal Charles. I'm not picking C.J. Anderson either because I'd take Devontae Booker based on the fact that I could get him in the 14th, 15th round, and he could end up being a starter. Because, I mean, C.J. Anderson and Jamal Charles, they're not built on, like, a great bill of health. I could very well see him being the starter later on in the season. Obviously not right away, but later on in the season I could see it happening.
Yeah, and I like Devontae Booker a lot last season. He worries me a little bit this season just because I expected more out of him last year. But like you said, the value there. So if he ends up being the starter and you get a starter in the 14th round, you can't go wrong there.
I mean, if we just avoided every single rookie that had a bad rookie season, we would. There's a lot of guys we wouldn't be drafting. We wouldn't draft Le'Veon Bell in his second year if you went off of the rookie season. I mean, he had 3.6 yards of carry. I think that could improve. They did try to bolster up their offensive line a little bit in the first round of the draft. So we'll have to see how it works out. Like I said, I'm not really thrilled about this backfield though.
Yeah, there's just too many mouths to feed.
I don't think they really have a tight end that's worthy of being drafted. I know they have Jake Butt, but he's coming off the ACL. Let's go over to the Kansas City Chiefs. I seen a thing on Twitter. I can't remember who posted it, but they're saying that the end is sooner rather than later for Alex Smith. I still think he's going to be the starter this year, but I think that Mahomes could give him some good competition come camp time.
Yeah, I like Mahomes a lot. He was someone who just looked like he could be a good pro in college, just watching him play. And Alex Smith, I don't really like Alex Smith that much. I don't like those type of quarterbacks where they just will not throw it downfield.
Yeah.
And they just will just throw it to their tight end every time. It makes it so boring to watch. But that being said, I mean, they've been pretty good the last few years. You can attribute most of that to their defense, but I still think Alex Smith remains the starter this year, and I mean probably next year too. But you just never know.
Honestly, I wouldn't be mad because I'm one of those guys that want to see Mahomes sit back for a little bit. I don't think he's NFL ready quite yet, but I love his skill set. He's like a mobile Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking the running backs, I've heard a lot of hype for Kareem Hunt. Have you jumped on board?
Yeah, a lot of people like him.
Are you not buying it?
No, I haven't necessarily jumped on board yet. I had him as my 10th overall rookie in Dynasty leagues, just because I like him for the future. But right now, I mean, honestly, out of all the rookie running backs outside of McCaffrey and Fournette and maybe Dalvin Cook, he's got, I think, the best chance to end up starting this season, just because I don't think they like Spencer Ware as much as they thought they did. And, Sharkhandrick West isn't anything special. So if he comes out and he performs well, I think he could easily end up being the starter. But that being said, I'm also not that high on him. I didn't think he was the best running back available at that time. But, you never know with these type of players. Like, once they get in the game, they could end up being great. So you just don't know.
I mean, it would be a damn shame if you drafted Spencer Ware in the middle of the third round and he ends up not even being the starter.
Yeah, that's another. Like, I would stay away from him.
I mean, Kareem Hunt, he's going in the 13th round. A lot of times when I'm not sure about a backfield, I tend to just go for the guy that's later.
Yeah.
This wide receiving core is going to be a little bit interesting. Obviously, Tyreek Hill has a lot of hype. We've seen what he could do last year. I'm one of those guys, though, where if I'm playing in a redraft league, I'm fading those guys that were ultra efficient last year because I tend to think that it's going to regress. Like, it's really hard to stay that efficient for a long period of time. So if I'm playing in redraft leagues, I'm not drafting Tyreek Hill. He was really efficient last year. I could see that coming down a little bit.
Yeah, he's a strong candidate to regress this year for me, just because he had such a breakout year last year, and he is talented. Like, it's so obvious how talented he is, and they used him in so many different ways. But I am worried that he's just not going to see the amount of touches he did last year, and he's going high this year because of the year he had last year. But there's some players I'll make an exception for, but I tend to try to stay away from players that kind of came out of nowhere. And that's came back to bite me in some places, like Arian Foster. Like, I had a chance to draft him a year after he broke out, and I didn't think he would again, and he did. So, I mean, you just never know, but that's someone, at least for right now, who I'm probably going to stay away from.
Yeah, I mean, in redraft, the reason why you stay away from ultra-efficient guys like that come out of, like you said, come out of nowhere and were really efficient, the reason why you fade that in redraft is, one, because they're unlikely to repeat that, and two, because they were so efficient last year, they get all this hype, and now you have to pay for that efficiency. Therefore, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying what you're selling, people. But
yeah,
I do think though he's gonna get more targets than he got last year. He's just not gonna be as efficient with them. And it's not, all he's gonna do is hurt Macklin, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another wide receiving core that I'd stay away from probably if I could.
I was just about to say it's not really a receiving core I want to deal with. Travis Kelce is another guy that you're going to really have to pay the price for because of how good he was. He was tight end 1 last year, and he's going right behind Gronk, only a few picks behind him, I believe. I'm looking it up right now, but he's going at the end of the third, and he's going around after Gronk, basically.
Yeah,
that's a high price to pay.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like if you're wanting a tight end and you want to draft one high, I'd probably go ahead and draft Kelce around later, and that way you can get a player like an Amari Cooper, or if someone falls to you, like a Dez Bryant or a Todd Gurley, someone like that. If they fall to you, I would get them, and then you can wait and get Travis Kelce instead of drafting Gronk and then having to get a guy like Jarvis Landry or Demaryius Thomas, somebody like that. So I like Kelce. I don't like him where he's at. He's only going 2 picks before Jordan Reed, which I think is insane. As much as I like Jordan Reed, like he just gets injured way too much. I think Kelce is much more valuable than Reed. But yeah, I like Kelce, just not as high as he's going.
Yeah, the only way I'm drafting Travis Kelce in the 3rd round is if it's like a tight end premium league, and that's only a maybe because I mean I'm not big on taking tight ends that early. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go over to the last team in the show, basically. The San Diego Chargers. We've been building it up for you. Phillip Rivers, he's a guy with a lot of weapons this year. I mean, think about all the weapons he has. I mean, they probably have one of the best wide receiver cores in the league just based off of depth alone. They have Melvin Gordon, who had a stellar year last year in terms of touchdowns at least, but Phillip Rivers is a guy that still kind of fell off towards the end of the year. He's starting to get older. His arm strength is starting to go, but he still has a lot of weapons that I like.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said earlier, like I really like Mike Williams. I'm not sure how he's going to do this year. Personally, I think he could end up being the number 2 in terms of just like pure talent. I don't think that'll happen. I think they're gonna keep the same core 3 with Inman, Tyrell Williams, and Keenan Allen. But I mean, like I said earlier, you never know with Keenan Allen's injuries. I mean, Inman's had injuries. Williams had some injuries last year, so all 3 of them have some injury
Travis
issues.
Benjamin.
So, yeah, and so, I mean, so you've got all those to work with. Like, he's going to probably start out the season 4 or 5 on the depth chart, but I think he could work his way up and be a big weapon.
You think Mike Williams is going to be number, 4 or 5 on the depth chart?
I mean, probably just because they're going to have – it's going to be Keenan Allen, Tyrell Williams, and then Inman probably are going to be the top 3. And then it's going to be him and Travis Benjamin.
What if they put Tyrell on the outside, they put Mike Williams on the outside on the other side, and Keenan Allen just stays in the slot?
Oh, I definitely think they could do that, and I think that's what they should do. Like, I think Mike Williams, honestly, I think he's probably the second best receiver on that roster. And if they do utilize him like that, I think he could end up being a great fantasy tight end this year, just because Phillip Rivers does such a good job of getting the most out of his receivers. And just watching him at Clemson, like, you could see it. I mean, he's an NFL receiver. Like, he just can go up and get it. He's a big guy, and I think he's going to be really good in this league for years to come.
You know, it's funny is you just called Mike Williams a tight end, and it's funny because I think that they might kind of use him like a tight end. I could see him being like a red zone option and really cutting into Hunter Henry's production that way.
Yeah, I mean, he could. Hunter Henry had a good year last year. He surprised a lot of people with his production.
Right, he scored touchdowns at a higher rate than I think he can sustain.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He's someone who could easily regress this season, and he's going to have a lot of weapons to deal with. So the offense is going to be interesting to look at. I mean, Phillip Rivers will still find a way to be down by 4 points with 12 seconds to go the length of the field every game. But I think the offense could end up improving this year and could be really good, but I still think they're going to finish last in the division.
Yep. Every time you have a team with all these weapons, usually the best option is just to take the quarterback because you know that he's going to throw the ball. You get the ball every time. So we never seen though a full season with this team staying completely healthy. At least from their core players. We haven't seen that from San Diego yet. Yeah,
definitely. They always do get hurt, and it seems like they always, as soon as one comes back, the other one gets hurt. So, like you said, you never really get to see them all at one time. But I think that's probably going to continue. I mean, I hope Keenan Allen stays healthy this year, but you just never know. I mean, he just gets hurt so often. But like we were talking about Phillip Rivers, he's going at the end of the 9th round, and that's someone who I'd be happy with waiting to get someone like him or Eli Manning.
Would you take him over Jameis Winston?
That's tough, just because I think Deshaun Jackson and O.J. Howard are going to be big additions to that offense.
I think they're both in similar situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think Deshaun Jackson is getting to be a little underrated because people just forget how good he was. He's still just as fast. He hasn't even lost a step yet, and he just was on an offense where his main job was to take the top off the defense. He never really got the ball much. He was just supposed to draw coverage, and so now he's not going to be the main receiver. He's going to have Mike Williams. So I think Deshaun Jackson is in line for a big year.
Okay. So I guess the only guy we really haven't mentioned yet on this Chargers offense is Melvin Gordon. Now, he seemed like a guy, he got most of his touchdowns inside the 5-yard line. So you could easily say that his touchdowns could regress, but it just seems like their team is a team that gets stuck inside the 5-yard line a lot. I don't know how to really explain it, but I think Melvin Gordon, if you take away all of his red zone carries, his average yards per carry actually is pretty respectable, 4.2. But he just had so many red zone carries that it kind of bogged down his average a little bit.
Yeah, and when they lost Danny Woodhead, he started catching a lot of passes for them too, and or a lot more than I expected at least. And he really surprised me last year because his rookie season, I was excited about him. I thought he was going to be really good. And then he just really disappointed me. And so I was so low on him. And then he broke out last year. And so I don't know what to expect from him this season. I assume he'll be like he was last season. But you just never know. And that's someone who I like. But as early as he's going, I'm not sure if I'll take him. Yeah, it's a little too high for me just to take someone in the first round who really just broke out last year and relied so much on his touchdowns. I'd be a little worried about drafting him.
Yeah, I mean, he's going before Devontae Freeman. I'd take Devontae Freeman before him every single time, obviously. But
yeah.
He has the pedigree of a first-round running back. I just wouldn't take him in the first round.
Yeah.
I know you like Hunter Henry. Do you see him as a tight end one this year? I mean, it really isn't that hard to be a tight end one nowadays because it's such a shallow position. If he gets like 7 or 8 touchdowns, he'll be there.
Yeah, I think he'll be good. I think tight end one, like you said, I mean, it's such a thin pool of players. I think he probably will be a tight end one. Depends on what you're classifying as a tight end one. Like, if you're just saying can start for your team, then definitely he's a top 12 tight end. But when I think of tight end ones, I think of Gronk, Kelsey, Jordan Reed, Jimmy Graham, and Greg Olsen. And Greg Olsen is going at the beginning of the 5th round here, and that's the same round as Tyler Eifert and a little before Jimmy Graham and Delaney Walker. And so I think that's a really good value pick right there. But with Hunter Henry, I'd probably go ahead and take a shot at him just because how much Phillip Rivers likes to use the tight end. And with all those weapons, like, they might not save much for the tight end in terms of coverage. So, I mean, you might see him get a lot of touchdowns this year. You might see him, like you said, put up 7 or 8 touchdowns. And if he throws in 500-600 yards, I mean, that's a solid season.
My only problem with Hunter Henry is there's so many options on that team. I don't see him having a high yardage total. I see him as like a red zone package. But even then, Gates is still on that team, and that might be his sole purpose is to be in the red zone just so he can get that fucking record that he's been trying to get for like a year and a half now. That's my only concern about Hunter Henry.
Yeah. I'm looking here. They've got Kyle Rudolph going ahead of Hunter Henry, and I'd probably take Hunter Henry. I know Kyle Rudolph. A lot of people are high on Kyle Rudolph this season, but I'd probably go ahead and just stick with Hunter Henry there. But, there are, like you said, there are a lot of weapons, and you don't know how it's going to all shake out. But Phillip Rivers has always used the tight end a lot, and even though they still got Gates, I still think Hunter Henry, like, Gates might come in when they're on the goal line or the 5-yard line, but I think you could see Hunter Henry scoring some touchdowns from outside of, like, maybe outside the red zone, but more like the 15, 20-yard line, something like that.
Is there anybody else that you want to mention before we end the show?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, Casey, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. I hope that you enjoyed your time. If you could tell them one more time where they can follow you, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's on Twitter at Fantasy S Central, and then my Twitter handle for my personal account is at the real Pac-Man, the real _ Pac-Man. Sorry, but yeah, y'all can just follow me on there. I've only got for my fantasy football, and I just started it, or my fantasy sports one, so it's only got like 40 followers. But I'm still tweeting out online, so I should be a decent Twitter follow for those fantasy sports fans out there.
Yeah, we'd like to have you on more often. You guys can also follow us on Twitter at the Fifth Down FF. Like I said, you could please rate and review us on iTunes. That'd be greatly appreciated. You can also find us on Stitcher and Spreaker for you non-iPhone users. That'll be it, Fifth Downers. Thank you for tuning in to today's show.